What did the weird kid do to earn that reputation? The weird kid at my school always claimed she was a wizard, and when someone spoke to her when she was, quote, casting a spell, i.e. screaming at the ground, she would turn around and either scream in their face or slap them. I was new to the school at the time, and I got screamed at because I was legitimately worried that she might be hurt or something. There was this guy, one class below me, who just ate everything. Once he went to the front of the classroom where the sink thingy is, took a big stack of paper towels back to his place, and just started eating it mid-lesson. Another time he drank a Capri Sun in class, and when he was finished, he just ate the package with straw and everything. The weirdest thing was when he ate a toy car that the teacher brought to show something. He just sat in front of the teacher's desk, took the car from it, and swallowed it without saying anything. He brought a live lobster to a middle school dance and let it go on the dance floor during the dance. It wasn't even a question of who would have done this. It was Nate. Nate did it. He thought he was a robot. Often you'd find him in the halls, alone, talking to electronics about destroying the human race or having a conversation with a locker. Flicked the bean during class, then brought a cake the next day to apologize. There was a girl in my school that got caught trying to color her entire tongue with a black Sharpie in like 7th grade. It was honestly surreal to witness. The teacher was so confused and just walked her to the principal. A few years later, she was expelled for drinking booze during school on multiple occasions. Did a countdown to his toots like they were a fricking moon launch. Of all the things I thought I would find in this thread, inspiration wasn't one of them. I mean, this guy just sounds fricking funny, and like he was waiting to basically age into dadhood. Godspeed, sir. Pulled out his armpit or downstairs hair one by one and ate them. Ate a live lizard while the entire school was hanging out on the football field during a fire drill. Set his arm on fire on a school trip to France. Sprayed his arm with deodorant for about a whole minute before getting someone to light it. It wouldn't go out until he used the tap in the bathroom to douse it with water. He ended up with blisters and permanent scarring. So the school trip ends and we get to go back to school the week after. All of a sudden, me and 4 other kids got pulled into a classroom to be questioned by police and the head teacher. He basically told his mum that we did it to him. Obviously this didn't stick as we all had the same story. If I had Facebook, I'd look him up to see how life is for him nowadays. Screw people like that. A classmate in elementary broke his arm doing dumb crap and tried to frame us for it because he was so embarrassed. He pulled some crap like that later in school life too. My man would wear a stormtrooper costume and taped an old flip-up phone to his arm and pretend to talk through it. This was in high school. He was particularly odd because he was like a born genius, so he'd often get bored in class and do some weird stuff. To be honest, looking back on it, I feel really bad for the guy. He was incredibly smart but had zero social skills and an unfortunate lump of fat right on his forehead that people would bully him for. It was also like he tried to get in trouble every chance he could. Anyways, some things he did that came to mind. He would pick at and pop his pimples in class. Like pimples on his arms and shoulders, he'd just go to town on them and be all red and marked by the end. When I was in school, we had a serious no electronics policy. A few times he'd bring his Nintendo DS and play that thing full volume and of course off to detention. Because he was so smart, he'd often correct teachers and other students, but in the rudest way possible. And he was always technically correct, if that makes any sense, also often resulting in detention. Can't think of any more specifically fun stories. He rarely showed up to school, to be honest. Maybe because he felt he didn't need to, or maybe because everyone, including the teachers, weren't always the nicest to the kid. Got caught whacking it in the school bathroom, then later got his member stuck in a shampoo bottle. Guys, if you get your small sir stuck in a shampoo bottle and your mum has to take you to hospital to remedy the situation, you need to keep that to yourselves. There is no teenager in the world who's going to keep that knowledge to themselves. Yar, he dressed as a pirate every day for 8 years. Legitimately said he was leaving rural Michigan to move to the Caribbean and become a pirate. Changed his name to Blackbeard Ryan. Raised his hand, and when the teacher called on him to answer his question, he started singing Frere Jacques. Cut himself in class, waited for the blood to congeal a bit, and then just ate it. Just writing that made me gag. Years later, he got arrested for stabbing someone. Well, did the deed with a goat lad. He had a notoriety for crapping his pants at least once a day and was super casual about it. I remember I was behind him in the hall one day when I saw a massive log just plop out of his short legs. He looked back at it and just kept on strutting. Whoa, wait, what the heck? Was the kid just walking around fully loaded all day? And crap coming out of his pants was a once-a-day thing? Yeah, seriously, it got so bad that administration got involved and ended up requiring him to wear diapers. He was at a high level of not giving a frick. Damn, you usually don't get to that point until you're old. Maybe he's not giving a frick because he's too busy giving a crap. He drew Pokemons getting busy with each other during class, for a few years. Collected earthworms when it rained in the pouch of his hoodie, and then laid them out in the schoolyard spelling his own name. He cried when he saw that it had been scraped from the pavement the next day. By that time, he was around 13. Predictably, people, by which I mean we, started calling him Worm Kid. He got expelled around a year later for throwing a fistful of earth at a teacher. To elaborate on him having to leave the school, this act of dirt tossing happened inside of a classroom at close proximity when he'd been called to the blackboard during a Latin lesson. I'm from Europe. The teacher completely lost their crap. The moist soil was all in her hair, and she later said a couple of live beetles and little pebbles or bone splinters were also found in that mix, though I can't say whether that's true. I mean, there were so many examples, but this one stuck out to me. There were twin boys in my high school who were just odd. We were in Spanish class together, and the teacher had this habit of making beeping sounds to get the attention of students who were talking. So one day that's happening and the teacher goes, beep, 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 and one of the twins shouts, "Fire the missiles!" and crawls under his desk and runs out of the room. I thought it was so funny, I about fell out of my chair laughing. I don't know. Is that an end of the world reference from that kid, or just very specifically random? The age of this post would imply that it was a bit too recent for it to reference that specific animation. I guess the narrator will never know. When we were about 15, Harrison, we were all addressed by our surnames, decided to one day wrap his eggplant in adhesive tape during a biology lesson. I can't remember why nor how he managed to remove it, but I was impressed. He also held the record for stabbing into the desk between each finger of his outstretched hand with a compass, a very sharp point, as fast as possible despite hitting a finger at least once. He later became a distinguished surgeon. He would bark like a dog when talked to. He probably had some mental problems, but most people just avoided him. A girl in my year at school told us she has a ghost in her bedroom and it told her that if she didn't brush her teeth, it would burn her house down. Another girl said she wanted to do the deed with our headmaster, but she was like 7 at the time, and she used to scratch people in the face like a cat. I held the door open for her once and she flipped me off and called me a fricking B-word. I knew a girl who'd developed much earlier than everyone else. She had like double D's and severe acne in grade 6. She used to act out weird scenes from TV shows by herself at recess. She was the type who told everyone she had a boyfriend who had a Porsche, but went to a different school. Again, we were like 12. People made fun of her for the usual things and crap she did, but one day things took a dark and strange turn. Some girl named Katie said something to her in line after lunch, and she lost it. She smoked Katie in the head with her flute case and then hit some other kid who wasn't saying anything. She then spit chocolate milk all over a teacher who asked her what was going on. Everyone was pretty shocked, but then she proceeded to sit down on the ground, started to cry, and peed her pants right there. The ground was kind of sloped away from the school, so a puddle formed and then created like a stream of pee all the way to the field, maybe about 15 to 20 feet. Everyone just stood there in shock at how many things had just happened in the span of 90 seconds. For those asking what she's doing now, I asked a couple of people if anyone knew, and I was told last they'd heard she had a daughter with her partner and seemed happy. We were freshmen in an urban high school. He made increasingly wild claims like he had a bunch of illegal automatic weapons, he made poison darts and blow guns, his sensei could outrun an arrow fired from a bow, and he was learning how to do it himself, and that he had a nitro kit in his Trans Am that he used to outrun police. He was transferred to another school. The next I heard of him 2 years later, he had crashed into a brick wall and died while fleeing the police. The report said he lost control when he engaged his nitro kit. ate a battery in class, peed in a bottle on a bus full of 60 kids, chipped his tooth sucking on a Tajin packet. All of his siblings are named the same name, Martin. Is his name Martin? Yes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'm not really sure what this guy did, but he was a fun guy to be around, presumably just ugly and visibly mentally ill. Once he said he was going to bring a surprise to a pep rally and got talked to by police, but it turned out just to be a bucket full of candy. He got nominated Homecoming King, despite the principal trying to stop him from being elected. He won. He had a ton of school spirit too. It was really weird. And yeah, a lot of people have concerns about it being a Carrie type situation, but I don't think it was, as the kid said that the principal didn't like him at all and seemed to wait for him to make mistakes, just so that he could dish out a punishment. I overheard the guy talking about it with his friends, and I remember that he was called to the principal's office to talk about it. But he didn't say anything about the principal being scared of him, being teased or anything. My memory's a little hazy, but I'm pretty sure it was just because he wouldn't fit the school's image. That's what the kid felt, at least. I finally found out what made him the weird kid. He tore up a tree in the school parking lot and beat a car with it. Other than that, though, he seemed well liked. We had that horse girl. She always pranced around like a horse, would snort in surprise, that sort of thing. In grade 5 and 6, she always wanted to play horses. My friends and I told her that was so lame and then would go off to play wolves instead. Took a bite of a urinal cake because he was curious. Ugh. This one kid at the tender age of 12 found a used rubber in the gutter, washed it out, and then subsequently propositioned a girl in his class by showing it to her and asking her to do the deed with him in the toilets at lunch. I was the president of the improv club at my high school. The weird kid was a member. Now, remember that episode of The Office when Michael would interrupt every improv scene as a cop? It was like that, except this kid always had an evil or dark magic theme. Characters in the scenes turned out to be his evil brother from the Dark Outlands. Imaginary props would turn into mythic swords formed from shadows. But this kid was so desperately unpopular, no one had the heart to kick him out of the club. I mean, it kinda sounds like this kid just wanted to LARP. Yeah, can you imagine how much he would have loved that? The narrator sincerely hopes this kid found the LARP Society, or at the very least, discovered RPGs, and finally found his people. He would crank it everywhere and be caught, like all the time. In class, on the football field, in the tuba room, you name it. He also claimed with all seriousness to everyone that he was dating the most popular girl at our school. She was in a long-term relationship with another one of the popular kids, so everyone knew he was full of crap, but he stuck to his guns. Wore the same blue dress every single day to school. Sat in the hall by herself during all class parties. I know she was a Jehovah's Witness, but it wasn't until I was older that I understood what that meant, and how isolating it must have been for her as an 8-year-old and up. The only one in that tiny farm town with nobody even wanting to sit by her on the bus. I still feel it in my gut when I think about her from time to time, 5 decades later. She never did anything to any of us. Sorry, Ramona. I went to Parkland a few years back. In my first period, we had Nicholas Cruz in our science class. Whenever he was called on, no matter what question, he'd always yell out B, as in that's the answer. He sat in the middle of class and one girl kept flirting with him by stabbing him in the back of the head with a pencil, while her friend laughed along. We graduated before he committed mass murder. In 4th grade, this kid brought metal Chinese throwing stars to school and started throwing them around the classroom. He was gone for about a week, and then a few weeks after that, he pulled out some nunchucks and hit a girl in the face. We didn't see him for the rest of the year. 5th grade starts, and there he is. It was show and tell, and he brought a small pet turtle. He was in front of class and took the turtle out and said, "My turtle does tricks. Look, he can break dance." He then put it on its back and spun it like a top. It went flying off the stool onto the hard ground and landed on its shell. He was called Turtle or Turtle Boy the rest of school until he disappeared in junior high. This was in the 80s. I wonder how he turned out. Frickin' weirdo. It sounds like he was trying to be a preteen Ninja Turtle. In high school, a kid had upper teeth like a horse, always out of his mouth and never brushed them. When a teacher was doing roll call and said if we had nicknames or alternate names we wanted to be called, his name was called and he said, "I want to be called Shadow." like an edgelord. He always never did schoolwork and instead watched Pokemon in class and played Pokemon while walking around the halls. He never washed his hands after going to the washroom, and multiple times I heard him moaning in the washroom stalls about different Pokemon and trainers, such as Gardevoir, Lopunny, Leafeon, Misty, Jessie, and a lot more. Every so often you'd see him also choking his chicken in the middle of class while staring at the teacher or some girls in the same class. Got into a fight with someone because he thought he was tough and wanted to show off to a girl. Also, never showered. This was all in grade 12. I'd like to mention as well, I'm not bashing Pokemon, I freaking love Pokemon. He would go around asking people, if you knew an alien that looked like, and he'd give a description, and you really loved them, would you do the deed with that alien? Alien description changed a lot from question to question, and if you answered him, he'd keep asking the questions with different types of aliens. Key point being that you always shared an emotional connection with the alien. Poor kid was just trying to sort out his alien fantasy, I think. This kid in elementary school who had to be the first at everything. And no, I don't mean like super competitive in sports or whatever. I mean he had to be first in line, first in school, first out, among other things. He'd be in front of the school before it even opened to the students, like 6:30 a.m. Class started at 7, waiting for that clock hand to touch 6:30 so he could sprint in and sit first in his class. He would sit near the very front of the class so he could be first in line. He would always, without a doubt, raise his hand as soon as the teacher asked a question to start the class. Most of the time, he didn't even know the answer. The teacher would pick him, and he'd start frantically looking for the answer, or he'd make stuff up. As soon as class ended, he'd sprint across the whole school so he could be the first out the doors. And here's some more weirdness. Every day during recess, he'd always hang out right next to the fence line closest to the school. As soon as the teacher would blow the whistle, he'd be right there immediately. The teacher would tell everyone to turn in their homework from the night before in this basket thing, and he'd grab it and book it to go turn it in first. Problem was, the basket was on the opposite side of the classroom. Remember, he sat up front. More often than not, I remember some poor soul or chair or desk getting in his way and getting trampled. He'd always be the first to finish his tests or quizzes. I never really paid attention to his grades, but I assumed he did fine since he never failed a grade. I remember blazing through a math test. As soon as I stood up to turn it in, he jumped in front of me and handed in his test first. I don't even know if he finished it. That boy had better be a NASCAR driver now. I just realized this was like 20 years ago and I still remember him in great detail. The weird kid in my year basically started out as a meme. He was odd, socially isolated, talked to himself a little, nerdy, terrible at sports, cannon fodder for the popular crowd. We were, and still are, friends though. Freshman year, a joke starts going around that he should be prom king. No one takes it too seriously, but it's considered funny. French teacher picks it up and supports it. 4 years later, he's been so heavily memed, everyone loves him, and he gets elected homecoming king. Ha! Look at that. Crappy behavior and social isolation, leading to what seems like quite a positive outcome. Good for him. I hope his novelty value coasted through to some more tangible friendships. This was in 6th grade. She told everyone she was raised by wolves. She'd draw a paw print on her palm to show as proof, howled during recess, and would growl at the younger kids. There were times when she'd chase around the younger kids, and they looked like they were having fun, so I guess it was fine. But then she'd hide under the playground to meditate, but she was really just peeing herself. Then she'd come back out and continue to chase the kids. She also smelled really bad, like the whole classroom stunk because of her. Teacher pulled her aside a few times and asked her about her hygiene, but nothing changed. He was quiet at first, so me and my friends became friends with him. Months later, he confessed his love to one of them and got rejected and started stalking us by finding out where we lived and, more to the point, where we had to get restraining orders on him that he kept breaking. This was in middle school, 8th grade. Me and the kid weren't really friends, but were well acquainted with each other as we had a lot of classes together. One morning, yes, early morning, we go to our first class. There were big tables with 2 chairs on each side, so nothing was really separating us. My table was in the back of the room and he sat right next to me. Some time passes and I suddenly hear small but fast movements. I turn to see this kid figuratively whacking the mule next to me. And this wasn't any subtle jerk, this was one of those "I'm in the zone" jerks. I scream and 2 others across from us realize what's happening and they back away as quickly as possible. One just falls out of her chair and starts scurrying to the front of the room. He gets pulled out of class, and a few weeks later, everyone is calling him the math abater, because we were in math class when this happened. Looking back now, it was absolutely hilarious. In high school, our weird kid was a guy who was legally blind but could see general shapes and light. He was obsessed with the idea that he could be a truck driver, constantly made engine noises all the time. He was also grossly creepy towards anyone he thought sounded female, like would feel people up because he said he didn't know because he couldn't see what he was touching. He did that to a couple of my friends. I was nice to him for a while, but he kept hitting on me because my voice was high, and eventually I dodged him in the halls. I feel kinda bad for him though. Lots of people would just go silent and still if he approached because he was so creepy. I did some low-level parkour to get away from him once. I think he might have been overcompensating for being blind, and I did want to be nice to him. But he was also definitely a low-key predator, because how does the school prove the blind kid is really doing that and not accidentally brushing them when he was trying to find his way around? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.